Well, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I hope you enjoy your time off. We've got a good episode here today. I want to talk about Russel Brand, the hidden world of drugs, discernment, and why we need to arrest homeless people. I'm sure it'll be a nice, uncontroversial episode for all of you as you have a nice, uncontroversial Thanksgiving with your various family members. That is, if they're brave enough to risk the pandemic that's tormenting the world right now. So I find Russel Brand to be a very interesting guy, and I understand that he's a liberal and all of that, but he's a person that has gone from the bottom of the barrel and the whole celebrity and the drug addiction and the collapse to someone that is speaking truth, and you can watch his evolution as a man. And he's also very charismatic, he's very entertaining, and most importantly, he has a huge following. And so he's replacing the institution of the completely corrupted news media with a guy that is struggling and trying to tell truth to an equally large or larger audience than the media can command today. And so I was watching him talk about his early years when he was part of MTV and he was doing drugs all the time, and he talked about the hidden world of drugs. And he was doing things like he'd shoot up a bunch of heroin, well then, makes you tired, and then you'd have to smoke a bunch of crack to give you energy, and how whacked out he was. I think I vaguely remember this, but he dressed up like Osama bin Laden after the events of 2001 when Building 7 collapsed due to melting office furniture. And very tasteless, very, too soon? Yeah, way too soon. But it shows how screwed up he was, and he talked about hitting the bottom of the barrel, but he also touched on something I thought was very interesting to those of you that have no real experience in the world of drugs, and that's this hidden world. It's almost like the Harry Potter world where you seem to run through the brick wall, and there's this entire realm that you weren't aware of, like when they're flying over everyone's heads at night, and won't the muggles see us? And another wizard says, muggles never see anything. And it's out there. He talked about, you'd be out during the middle of the day, and you'd see an average age 30-whatever-year-old person standing on the sidewalk with no apparent purpose, just standing there. And then a car drives up, they talk briefly, and a car drives away. Now, to the average person, we're probably at work, but if you're off that day, you don't see anything really going on there. But to the person that knows what they're looking at, what you just saw was a drug deal. It's this hidden world that is right there beneath the surface, and it's going on all the time, this black market, these kind of signals and codes and exchanges. And Russel Brand really goes into this in his video about, it's called When I Hit Rock Bottom. But it got me thinking about my own life. I came from a very small town, and then when I went to college, I moved up to a city in Western Washington. It was very liberal, and it was kind of, I guess you'd call it bohemian. And at that age, 19 years old or whatever, I was completely unaware of the politics of things, and I largely was oblivious to all this. Drugs and stuff it never had a hold on me. I don't know what it was. It just didn't attract me the way some people get sucked in. It may just be I have a habit of I like to read for 20 minutes or so before I go to sleep every night, and I found I didn't even like going to bed with a buzz from drinking. I like to have my 20 minutes of kind of clear thinking and reading a book, so it just didn't pull me in, but it started to pull in people around me. And so just by living up in this city, I began to see things in a way I had never seen them before. But one night in particular, I had what was probably one of the saddest experiences of my life, and it changed the way I looked at all of this forever, because I was very libertarian, who are we to say what people put in their bodies, kind of an intellectual view of a real-world problem. So one night, I don't know, I was probably about 21 years old. Me and a couple of my buddies were out at a bar, and we were just drinking pitchers. And we'd been there for a few hours, and I don't know, it was probably 11, 12 o'clock at night on a dark, cold November evening, much like this. And we ran into a friend of ours who we'd known from the dorm room, our hippie friend. And everybody liked hippie friend. He was tall, skinny, charismatic, goofy guy, but he was fun to be around. But if anyone I knew was ever addicted to pot, it would be hippie friend. And you got to remember, back in those days, you couldn't go to the store and buy it. It was actually still highly illegal, even in Washington State. And so he came up to us and we talked, how you doing? And he had found a guy. He said, hey, I really, because this guy smoked like every single day. He said, I need to go get some dope here. Do you guys mind following me to make sure, nothing goes awry? And my friends were pretty big guys. Like, my roommate was so big, he got onto the college football team not by trying out, but by walking past practice one day and telling all the football players that they sucked. And the coach overheard him and called him out onto the field right there. Like, he was a big, big guy. And my other friend was also a pretty big guy, and he was the Taekwondo champ for Washington State in 2002 at his weight class, I think 200 pounds. So a couple of big guys, and I'm not a small guy, I'm not huge, but, 5'10", a reasonably respectable height. So he wanted us to watch his back, and we'd been drinking all night, and it was like, sure, whatever. That sounds like a fun adventure. And so hippie guy starts following this little weaselly guy that he met somewhere, and we're thinking we're just going to walk outside the bar. There'll be a quick little exchange, and we'll go back in and start listening to the jukebox again. But instead, we keep walking. And mind you, it's dark and it's cold. And we keep walking past these storefronts like, man, where are we going, hippie friend? And we keep walking, and we start walking out of town. And pretty soon there's no stores at all. We're just walking along the side of the road, and it's like, how far are we going to go? And we're coming up, and there's the river, and there's a bridge that goes across the river. And I'm thinking, we're going to go across this bridge and go out into the countryside, apparently, for this exchange. But instead of crossing the bridge, the little weaselly guy walks down this steep bank and disappears into the shadows. And hippie friend follows him, and me and my two buddies look at each other like, okay, like I guess so. So we walk down this muddy, steep path, and it was the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. We get to the bottom of the trail, and it flattens out, and about, 20 yards away is the river, and there's just this long, muddy flat under the bridge. And hippie friend is following weaselly guy down towards the river at the end there, where he's going to talk to apparently the guy that has his dope. But we looked around, and under that bridge, 30, 40, 50 people, all socially distancing, just standing there like zombies. Nobody's moving, nobody's talking. It's almost like there was a gray moonlight shining down, and it was just this motionless mass of people standing there silently. It was like a field of living, breathing, standing corpses. And of course, this city was known for its heavy heroin use, and we had apparently stumbled upon a den, a community of heroin addicts, just standing there in the middle of the night in November, blitzed out of their minds, just silently riding out their 2 hours of pleasure in between the hell that they had turned their lives into. And it kind of looked like, I don't know if you remember The Little Mermaid, those poor unfortunate souls just kind of sitting there, just back and forth, kind of just swaying in the water. But it was like that. It was like a bunch of empty vessels just standing there. And the three of us just stopped. We didn't go any further. We didn't accompany hippie guy to go talk to dealer guy. We were just like paralyzed, like, what is this? Even the big football player that talked tons of smack to an entire football team and was so big, they picked him up right there. None of us wanted anything to do with this. It was just gross. And so Hippie guy comes skipping back, got his little bag of dope, and I took one last look at these poor unfortunate souls under the bridge there, just standing there silently in hell. And we climbed the muddy trail and got out of there and went back to the bar, and it was just like one of those, like, what was that? And it was one of the experiences that encouraged me to leave the city after college and move back to a small town. Well, a couple months later in the newspaper, I read a story how a bad shipment of black tar heroin had hit the city, and it wiped out the addicts' population. And I have no doubt that every single one of those people is dead. Certainly 20 years later, none of them are here anymore. They destroyed themselves under the bridge, addicted to heroin. And that's what it was like. Being under that bridge was like being at a funeral for people that were still alive. Well, what caused this? Well, I didn't understand the politics of things at the time, but it is the sin of tolerance. It's a very liberal city, very blue Western Washington, and people didn't want to do anything. Why do I call tolerance a sin? Well, tolerance is an inversion of the Christian virtue of discernment. Discernment is nothing more than the ability to decide between truth and error, right and wrong. Discernment is the process of making careful distinctions in our thinking about truth. Well, think about that. Truth needs to be objective. One of the things that atheism manages to do is it banishes God. So the ultimate atheist would be a nihilist, would be a heroin addict underneath the bridge, living a few moments of bliss before their body is destroyed. Purposeless, meaningless. And the reason it's allowed to exist is because of tolerance. Tolerance is like the cool mom that never says no to the kids. Like, oh, they just want to drink alcohol, and I don't want to be mean. Just as it would have been mean to, say, arrest those drug addicts under a bridge, it would have made them angry and sad and it put them in pain. So to spare yourself from the negative emotions, you indulge in this sin or this inversion of virtue called tolerance. Because tolerance has no line. Where is it? Like, well, I'll tolerate stealing merchandise under $500, but I won't tolerate stealing merchandise under $1,000. Or I won't tolerate stealing merchandise over $1,000. Where do you draw the line with tolerance? It has no line, because wherever you draw a line, you are no longer tolerant. And by your fruits shall you know them. And see, it initially feels very good. It's almost like the drug, right? You get to put this gold star, this virtue signal that, look, I'm a good person because I'll tolerate this. Yeah, well, where do you draw the line? Well, you can't with tolerance. Only a discerning person can draw the line between right and wrong, truth and error. That is the actual virtue. The problem is these people under the bridge, they needed help, right? They needed help. They needed tough love. Now, tough love is still love, but think about how many people had failed them with their tolerance. Where were their parents? Why weren't they intervening? Where was their family? Where was the law? Where was society? But people call me very hard-hearted because I would go in and I'd arrest them all. And most addicts that get arrested say it's the best thing that ever happened to them. It saved their lives because otherwise they don't die in the invisible world of drugs that most people don't even have to look at, so they don't have to feel the dissonance that their beliefs are actually evil and not good. Tolerance frees them from the guilt of their own inaction. Schellenberger wrote a piece, Why We Must Arrest Drug Addicts. For those of you that don't know, Michael Schellenberger is kind of a liberal, or was. He's Time Magazine's Hero of the Environment, Green Book Award winner, and founder and president of Environmental Progress. He published a book, Apocalypse Never, which is a good one if you're a acolyte of climate change. But even here, these so-called liberals are saying, we must arrest the drug addicts. And make no mistake, these homeless people, These tent cities that are all over Seattle, these aren't people that are just down on their luck because the rent is too damn high. People that are down on their luck seek out help, social services, family. They don't set up tent cities with the invisible economies that everyone can pretend not to see of the exchanges of goods, services, products, money, threats, violence, disease, and all sorts of crime. It all goes on under the surface, particularly because these people generally are unconscious most of the day while people are out and about, and only awake very late at night. Michael Schellenberger writes, normalizing and liberalizing drug use has resulted in 100,000 drug deaths. Hey, that's almost 2 Vietnams. That's a 30% increase from the year before. In the year 2000, that was about when I had my foray under the bridge, it was just 17,000 people. 17,000, we're up to 100,000. Ladies and gentlemen, the fruits of tolerance. Instead of 50 people under that particular bridge, imagine 250. So Schellenberger continues, if we are going to significantly reduce drug deaths, we need to start arresting drug addicts. I'm not suggesting we arrest people who aren't breaking any laws other than using hard drugs. People who want to kill themselves in the privacy of their own homes should be free to do so. But people who use drugs can't publicly and break other laws stemming from their addictions, such as shoplifting, should be arrested, brought to justice, brought before a judge, and be given the choice of rehab or jail. Fair enough. But you can't just tolerate it, because tolerance allows this cancer to spread. It makes it easier to get. It gives a hub to this invisible world so everyone can go to one place. They all know the bridge to go under, except now it's in the parks and corners of cities where they are angry, desperate, suicidal human beings that have nothing better to do than throw chunks of cement onto the freeway of cars, people trying to go to work. Tolerance doesn't fix the problem. Discernment between right and wrong and having the courage to make the tough decisions. They're not homeless because they've fallen on hard times. They're homeless because they've made a series of awful choices and can no longer help themselves, and that your much vaunted tolerance is cruelty. It's a horror that you're forcing these people to live through. Schellenberger continues, many progressives and some conservatives will object to the approach of arresting addicts, saying Portugal, the Netherlands, and other European nations handled their addiction crises in the late 1980s. But they didn't. Faced with open drug scenes, Portugal and the Netherlands also tried the helping-only approach of giving addicts clean needles, which, by the way, have turned into entire parks throughout Seattle where they turn them into traps, spike traps, taping them to people's mailboxes, trying to get everyday, ordinary people sick, Hep C, whatever. They gave addicts clean needles, offering methadone, an opioid substitute, and they failed. Addicts took the needles and methadone, kept shooting heroin in public, and dying. It was only after those nations started arresting addicts and giving them the choice of rehab or jail that lives were saved. Tough love is still love. Discernment is the ability to tell between right and wrong. Tolerance is the inversion of discernment that cannot draw a line in the sand anywhere, because then it's not tolerance. The second you say, I tolerate this but not that, it's the beginning of discernment. Tolerance has no line. Tolerance tolerates all. Schellenberger goes on, the moral thing to do is to arrest drug addicts. Does that sound mean to you? If it does, then you don't understand addiction, or you're in denial about its hold over people. And denial is nothing but a defense mechanism to protect yourself from your own negative emotions, to protect yourself from the consequences, the feelings you will feel from the hard decisions that must be made. Tolerance is merely ignoring the problem, kicking the can down the road till forever. Tolerance will never solve our problems. The only thing you can do is begin speaking truth. Begin using the Christian virtue of discernment. and then embracing the fact that tough love is still love, and begin making the hard decisions.